Shalom uvracha from Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. This evening, with the help of God, we continue our Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers study, and we are studying the 16th Mishna in chapter 1, Perek Aleph, Mishna Tet Zayin. Rabban Gamliel Haya Omer. Rabban Gamliel would often teach. He was accustomed to teach the following teaching. Seemingly, Rabban Gamliel, there are several people with that name in our tradition of the Mishnah. According to the commentaries on our Mishnah, we are talking about Rabban Gamliel HaZakein, who was a grandson of Hillel. Rabban Gamliel, the elder, there are other descendants of his who were also called Rabban Gamliel. This seems to be the first Mishnah in Pirkei Avot where we don't have the two partners, the Zugot. Until this point, we have studied about many of the rabbis who worked together as leaders of the community. Rabban Gamliel is the first Mishnah, seemingly, after the mention of the Zugot, where we're speaking about his exclusive teaching. He was the leader, the Nasi of the Sanhedrin, and we will study currently his insights into Pirkei Avot. The first teaching that he says is Aseh L'cha Rav. Aseh L'cha Rav. Find for yourself, make for yourself a teacher. Get yourself a teacher. Aseh L'cha Rav. Maybe in order to get to know who your teacher is, you have to know who you are, because you have to do a lecha. I say lecha. Maybe my Rav is not your Rav. Maybe his Rav is not her Rav. I say lecha Rav. Find the teacher. It's a very personal choice. Find one rabbi that you relate to, a rabbi that you think is speaking the words of God or understanding the words of God properly, and make that rabbi your teacher. Get for yourself a teacher. It's very, very important. It's so important that this is the second time in Pirkei Avot that we have the words Aseh L'cha Rav. And some of the commentaries ask, why is Rabban Gamliel why is Rabban Gamliel reteaching that which he already learned of Aseh L'cha Rav? V'histalek min hasafek, and remove yourself from doubt and uncertainty. So much of what we suffer from intellectually is we can't really figure out what the will of God is. But if a person is blessed to have a spiritual director, a spiritual leader, a spiritual guide, a Rav, a rabbi, so maybe histalek min hasafek, the person will be able to remove doubts from their minds, and will be able to worship God without safek. Safek means, according to certain interpretations, that even if a person feels, well, maybe I don't necessarily have to delve into really clearly ascertaining that which is true, I will just follow the stringent opinion. Let's say someone says, I'll always be stringent. So if I'm always stringent, so how bad could that be? It seems that this is not the proper guideway and guideline that our Mishnah is teaching. Rabban Gamliel seems to feel that you really do have to know that which is permitted and that which is prohibited. Let's say someone doesn't want to study, for instance, let's say the laws of Shabbat. Someone says, okay, well, I won't study the laws of Shabbat. Whatever question I have, I'll just be stringent. That does not seem to be the proper way of serving God. The opposite. A person should have a pathway, histalek min hasafek. And interesting to me is the fact that it is a prohibition of Torah, seemingly. It is a prohibition of Torah to just arbitrarily assign permitted activities and claim that they are prohibited. Everyone knows that it's a violation of Torah to permit that which is prohibited. But not everybody knows that it is also a violation to prohibit that which is permitted. I repeat, it's a prohibition to permit the prohibited, but it's also a violation to prohibit the permitted. And therefore, histalek min hasafek. If you remember in the vidui of Rabbeinu Nisim, the vidui Hagadol of Rabbeinu Nisim, said in the Sephardic communities on Yom Kippur as part of their liturgical order. I think Ashkenazim say parts of it in the Yom Kippur Katan, Erev Rosh Chodesh ceremony. And this is what he writes there. He says, Bama Akadem Omar Refuah Avakesh Kibein Sorer Umoreh Haiti Ke'eved Mored Al Adonav Ketalmid Cholek Al Rabbav. God, I have to ask for forgiveness. I really went against you. Quote, Eit asher tiharta timeti. Eit asher tiharta timeti. There were aspects of life which you said are pure, and I pronounced them impure. I want to regret, I want to confess. Eit asher timeta tiharti. That which you said was impure, I pronounced pure. Eit asher hitarta asarti. That which you said is permitted, I proclaim prohibited. The Eit asher asarta hitarti. The person has to be careful. And maybe lo tosifu below tigre'u. Do not add and do not subtract. Just try to ascertain that which is true. Because the Yerushalmi teaches at the end of the 5th chapter of Trumot, Masechet Trumot, Kishem sha'asur l'taher et hatamei, kach asur l'tamei et hatahar. This is extremely important. It's extremely important. It's important for all rabbis and for all morei hora'ah. And it's also important to understand a philosophy of Torah. It's just I'll just machamir. If there's room for chumrah, maybe machamir tavo alav beracha. But you have to know what's true. So aseh l'charav. I saw in one of the commentaries on the Yerushalmi. He writes as follows: Shelo yomar lo atriach atzmi la'amod al hadavar v'ho'il u'misupakani. The word safek. Atamenu. I will just say it's prohibited. I'll just say it's impure. The asur la'asod kei. You can't do that. You have to know what's permitted and what's prohibited. And if someone proclaims something which the Torah does not include as prohibited, it says, well, the Torah prohibits it. So sometimes, God forbid, they could be violating a biblical prohibition of adding to the prohibitions of Torah. Therefore, aseh l'charav v'histalek min hasafek. Remove yourself from doubt. The last clause of our Mishnah is extremely, extremely atypical to Pirkei Avot. It's so unusual that there's a vast literature as to what exactly the Rabban Gamliel mean. He suddenly discusses the concept of tithes, of giving maaser. Giving maaser is a wonderful exercise, to be able to properly share the maasrot, generally with the Leviim. We have maaser sheni, we have maaser rishon, we have maaser rishon, we have maaser sheni, we have maaser ani. But let's say maaser rishon, right? Let's say the 10th that goes to the Levites. He says, make sure that you measure your tithes. Don't just al tarbeh la'aser umadot. Let's say I have 100 bushels of wheat, that I have to give maaser. So how much of that is maaser? Let's say 10 bushels, or if it goes by weight, let's say I have 10 pounds of of produce. I'm supposed to 100 pounds of produce. I'm supposed to give 10 pounds. So I'll take more. What's the big deal? I want to exceed the amount. I won't measure it. I won't calculate it. Tarbeh. That sounds good. That could be true in charity. But in Maaser, the Gemara discusses, in Tractate Eruvin, you can't do that. Because there's only a certain amount that's allowed to be Maaser. And if you give more, then the language of the Gemara is in Eruvin, ma'asrotav v'kulkalin. The Levi is not even allowed to eat that maaser because part of that produce is not maaser, and no tithes were taken from it. So he suddenly is teaching us a very, very fascinating law in the laws of Ma'asrot, but that doesn't seem to fit the pattern of Pirkei Avot. That's not what we're learning here. We're not learning the laws of Ma'aser. Why is he? Don't give excess Ma'aser by estimating. Al tarbeh. You'll go beyond. I don't want to start calculating exactly how much is a tenth of this produce. Tarbeh. I'll increase. Sounds good, right? Al tarbeh la'aser umadot. Umadot means approximately. So it won't be 10%. So it'll be 15%. It'll be 20%, 12%. No, because there's an exact calculation. There are laws as to the status of the maaser, and if you give more than maaser, let's say you give 20% instead of 10%. The additional 10% cannot be categorized as maaser. You want to give charity afterwards. You want to give gifts afterwards. You can, but that additional 10%, says the Gemara, no tithes were taken from it, and it has a din of tevel. It has a din of prohibited food that even the Levi can't eat it. That's very nice. Except, is that really what he's saying? I mean, is he teaching us laws of maaser, or is this, as the Meiri and others want to say, this is not a technical teaching of maaser? This is an example of histalek min hasafek. As I was trying to say, a person could think, well, I'll be stringent. I'll give more maaser. Why do I have to exactly figure out how much the tithe is? I'll approximate. And I don't want. Of course, I wouldn't everybody has said underestimating tithes. Oh, I wouldn't do that because you have to give it that. I'll do more. No, doing more is not necessarily better. That's the teaching of Rabban Gamliel. And it seems that asay l'charav, one of the functions of a rabbi is, kolcha dehetera adif. A rabbi has to know. Anyone can say something is prohibited. Is this food kosher? No. I mean, what? Approximately. No, yeah. I mean, is this active? No. Can I do that? No. You don't have to be very learned to say no. I mean, no. There are prohibited products. There are prohibited activities. But asay l'charav, one of the functions of a real rabbi is to try to ascertain the true will of God. Yes, I'm sorry.
It seems to me that more than saying kochal dehetera adif, Rabban Gamliel is most important concerned with structuring halachic life. Halachic life is not an umdana, it's not a safek, you need a rav, you need a mora hara. In other words, and the fact that he's the head of the Sanhedrin, he wants you to have a structured halachic life, and therefore all these statements are leading to that point. That's
I accept what you're saying. I do think that there is a general tendency of people to feel that if I'm stringent, then that's good. I mean, and I sense in his words here that stringencies are not always, advisable. Sometimes if a person is stringent, then they can be denying themselves certain levels of religious activity, certain levels of proper behavior, and the stringency could be, contraindicated. Let's say someone. Yes, I'm sorry.
There is a proverb. Out here, tzaddik harbe.
That's right. That's what it says in Kohelet, right? That's what it says in Kohelet. Al tir shah harbe, al tir tzaddik harbe. Right? What's wrong? I mean, take various areas of Jewish law, and let's say someone doesn't want to really know what's permitted. They really don't want to know what's permitted. They just want to be stringent. That's a very big problem. It's a very big problem. Let's say they don't realize that this food is really kosher, and they think that only that product is kosher. So sometimes being overly stringent, it's wonderful to have high levels of kashrut. It's beautiful, but is it really necessary? Is it really proper? And then they cause social problems. Their brother invites them to the house, and they won't eat, and meanwhile their brother's eating a product which is absolutely absolutely kasher, but they've accepted upon themselves a stringency. When is a stringency proper? When is a stringency improper? Let's say here's a person who, in the laws of of personal life between a husband and wife, let's say in the area of nidah, in the laws of menstruation, and they said, okay, any question will just be stringent. Who wants to ask a rabbi, who wants to consult with anyone, will just be stringent. Any stringency in the laws of nidah can cause strife in the family, can cause the opposite of shalom bayit, can cause mahaloket. So he or she is doing it to be properly overzealous in religious observance. A person has to be careful. If someone sits on Shabbat and because they don't know the laws of Shabbat, so they don't do this and they don't do that, and Shabbat becomes a living hell for them because they're so afraid to do anything. Maybe this is prohibited, maybe that's prohibited, that's prohibited, and they don't enjoy the Shabbat. So that's the opposite of calling the Shabbat a delight. Al tarbeh la'aser umadot. But I would like to read, with your permission, I have here the book of Rabbi Twersky, as a psychiatrist, right? Rabbi Twersky wrote a commentary on Pirkei Avot. It's called The Visions of the Fathers. And he has a very fascinating section on our, and he associates this Mishnah with the problem of obsessive compulsive disorders. It's, I don't know how many commentaries on Pirkei Avot you're likely to find this. So he says Rabban Gamliel's 3-part statement can apply directly to obsessive compulsive disorders. One of the prominent symptoms of OCD is the inability to accept anything with certainty. Right? So it's always like safek, I don't know. Regardless of how many times the person checks something, he or she remains tormented by doubt. Safek. That is why it is sometimes referred to as the doubting disease. Even reassurance by competent authorities may not resolve the doubt. This inability to satisfy one's doubts can be extremely aggravating and depressing. Severe cases of OCD usually require medical treatment as well. In less severe cases, this is beautiful, right? It's so nice to read like a different perspective. Applying Rabban Gamliel's teaching can help greatly. Torah observant people who develop OCD are likely to manifest their symptoms in religious practices, such as, like a scrupulous observance between meat and milk, far beyond anything required by halakha. One woman with this disorder, OCD, would scrub her hands. I mean, after all, you have to separate meat and milk, right? So she would scrub her hands until her skin, God forbid, became raw, for fear of transferring contact, from milk to meat. She was unable to accept her rabbi's assurance. That's not what the Torah means, right? I say l'charav, v'histalek. I think this is when I saw this, I thought it was so, she was unable to accept her rabbi's reassurance that was unnecessary, and insisted on doing more than was required by halakha. When 10% of the harvest was given to the Levites, people with OCD. So 10%. Is it 10%? Well, maybe it's not. Is it 10%? Maybe it's not 10%. Maybe it is 10%. Okay, so I'll give more. I don't know. I can't measure that. So he's saying, no, I'll calm down and lead a normal life and follow a pattern of, as Rabbi Yosef teaches, right? A normative structure, right? When 10% of the harvest, I'm reading from Rabbi Twersky, when 10% of the harvest was given to the Levites, people with OCD probably gave more than the 10%. Why? For fear that if they gave precisely the right amount, so maybe it's not really the right amount, they may fall short by a fraction. However, giving more than the required amount is not doing a mitzvah the better way. To the contrary, it may even result in complications. So our Mishnah is teaching, aseh l'charav, follow a pattern of directives by great teachers, by great leaders. Histalek min hasafeh. Remove yourself. You're entitled to be stringent. Some of the greatest people in the world follow stringencies. You have to know when is a stringency to be encouraged, when is it to be discouraged, which stringencies should be applied. Sometimes a person takes a stringency upon himself or herself which is totally out of the range of their place in life, and it can cause, sometimes it can cause sinfulness. through the very stringency that they're taking upon themselves, this could cause them to violate a real halacha. And al tarbel aser umadot. Don't be so. Don't give excess tithes, because sometimes the excess tithes can lead to the opposite of the. You want to say something? No. Yes.
And there's a pattern. You have to start with Aseh L'Charav. The problem is this OCD fellow, he's going to say, I asked this rabbi, but maybe I have to ask another rabbi. And he will never get into the north. He has to start with a yesod. This is my shita. This is my rabbi. I'm out of the safek. Let's, in other words, get on with life.
That's the way Rabbi Twersky, that's the way Dr. Twersky concludes his comment on our Mishnah. We need to have a Rav whose ruling we can accept so that we'll be able to divest ourselves of doubts. Someone pointed out the word safek, I believe, is the numerical equivalent of Amalek. Amalek and safek are the same. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's an attacking element of our life. Furthermore, Rabban Gamliel says to the person plagued with uncertainties, do not try to do more than the halacha requires, because it may actually result in your handling matters the wrong way. Listen to your authority, listen to the halachic authority, and do as you're told, and you'll be spared of torment and death. This is one of the most beautiful commentaries I ever read on this Mishnah in my life, and but Baruch Hashem, we hope that everyone will find that proper pathway of following the Torah in its true level of requirement, fulfilling all of the teachings of Rabban Gamliel in the most proper of ways. Thank you so much for listening. Shalom, shalom, shalom.